Do I need to start again? Oh. The 21st Century Sunday Law Movement, there's a lot that's happening around the world that is showing us that there is a movement towards trying to coerce people towards Sunday, respecting Sunday. And I'm going to share with you what is happening in America and all over the world to try and push for one day, and that is Sunday as a day of rest, and finally a day of worship. I had mentioned earlier on, and the mic was not on, that President Donald Trump, the former president, had a meeting with about 1,000 evangelicals before he became the president and made promises to repeal the Johnson Amendment. And he finally did. And in repealing the Johnson Amendment, the relationship between church and state became much more closer than it was before. And among some of the evangelicals, when they look at the First Amendment, for example, they are challenging the interpretation that the First Amendment is really calling a separation of church and state. That there's nothing unconstitutional about the idea of a theocracy in America. And this is what happened in the 19th century. It's still happening even in America today. So I want to move the slides and show you some of their movements that are going on now. Okay, it's not moving? Okay. So before I get there, I want to read to you how Ellen White portrays how it's going to happen. And like she rightly stated, we have the U.S. Constitution that is basically prohibiting establishment of religion. The only way it can happen is when there's an amendment to that Constitution. That is the only way it can happen. And this is a statement that I would like to read. It says, "Our land is in jeopardy. The time is drawing on when its legislators shall so abjure the principles of Protestantism as to give countenance to Romish apostasy. The people for whom God has so marvelously wrought, strengthening them to throw off the galley yoke of popery, will be by a what? A national act. Give vigor to the corrupt faith of Rome, and thus arouse the tyranny which only awaits for a touch to start again into cruelty and despotism." So how does she say this Sunday law is going to be? She says it's going to have to be a national act. And this is in harmony with what she's saying, that whatever law it is, it has to be at national level. So I know that some people, well-meaning people, when they teach Sunday law, they speak about it as, the President of the United States is just going to enact an executive order which will say worship on Sunday. But here she paints a picture that the people will have to play a role in enacting this Sunday law. It has to be a national act. The second thing is that a more decided effort will be made to exalt the false Sabbath and to cast contempt upon God himself by supplanting the day he has blessed and sanctified. This false Sabbath is to be enforced by a what? An oppressive law. So it's going to be a national act. It's going to be a law. That is what she's saying. By the decree enforcing the institution of the papacy, in violation of the law of God, our nation will disconnect itself fully from righteousness. So it's going to be a national act. It's going to be a law. It's going to be a decree. And then this is where she says this law will actually be an amendment to the United States Constitution. We see that efforts are being made to restrict our religious liberties. The Sunday question is now assuming a large proportions. An amendment to our Constitution is being urged in Congress, and when it is obtained, oppression must what? Follow. So look at when she wrote this. This is in 1888, December 18. What had happened, just to give you a background to the statement, there was a senator called Senator Blair, and Senator Blair was elected because people wanted to push for Sunday. It was after the American Civil Law, and there were a lot of reform associations that wanted to reform America and make it into a theocracy. And so they voted political candidates. There was the National Sunday Alliance, the National Reform Association, the Women Christian Temperance Union. All these three organizations teamed up together, and they wanted to elect political candidates who are going to push for Sunday as a day of rest. And so Senator Blair was elected, and he pushed and he presented a proposal to amend the U.S. Constitution. And in 1888, on May 21, he presented this amendment to the Constitution to a committee on education and labor. And after he presented that, the committee went through the law, and then the people of America were invited to come in and put their inputs. So you had the Jews, you had Seventh-day Baptists, you also had Seventh-day Adventists sending representatives to go and present their arguments against the proposed amendment to the Constitution. And on December 13th, the arguments were presented. And if you want to read the arguments that Seventh-day Adventists presented and the dialogue that happened between Seventh-day Adventists and Senator Blair and some of the legislators at that time, you can find it in a book written by A.T. Jones, who was chosen to represent Seventh-day Adventist Church in that discussion. He wrote a book about it. It's called The National Sunday Law. And there are different books on the Sunday Law. There's the National Sunday Law by John Markerson. That Sunday Law by John Markerson is different. It's not the one I'm talking about. There's a National Sunday Law by A.T. Jones, Alonzo Trevor Jones. That is the one that has the documents of the actual debate that happened there. So I would encourage you to read it so that you get yourself acquainted with the debates that were happening. So there were many presentations that were done in that committee, and then finally that particular law was never brought to vote in the committee. It just died in the committee. And after that, there were another attempt in 1891. There were other several attempts, more than 1,000 attempts, to try and change the federal law and enact a Sunday law. So that is, I just wanted to give you background to the statement here. And then this amendment to the Constitution, what part of the Constitution will be amended? She's very specific. If the people can be led to favor a Sunday law, the people can be what? Led to favor a Sunday law. So what she's basically saying here is there's going to be a movement to try and convince the American citizens and other citizens of the world to kind of gravitate towards Sunday as a day of rest. And the reason I'm reading this, I'm going to show you these movements that are pushing for Sunday in America, in Europe, and in other parts of the world as well. So I wanted to see that there has to be a movement to lead the people to favor a Sunday law. Then the clergy intend to exert their united influence to obtain a what? A religious amendment to the Constitution. So it's not just an amendment, it has to be a religious one. In other words, amending the law that is the part of the Constitution that affects religion, and compel the nation to keep Sunday. So that is what we see here. And this Sunday law will finally be worldwide, but she speaks about it as starting in America. She says, as America, the land of religious liberty, shall unite with the papacy enforcing the conscience and compelling men to honor the false Sabbath, the people of every country on the globe will be led to follow her example. It's happening not only with, it will happen not only with Sunday laws, but when America sneezes, what happens to the rest of the world? America sets the tone, and we all follow. Foreign nations will follow the example of the United States. Though she leads out, yet the same crisis will come upon our people in all parts of the world. This is a very interesting prediction, that there will be a religious amendment to the Constitution, and it will start in America, and then the rest of the world will follow. And then in the great conflict between faith and unbelief, the whole Christian world will be involved. You know, there are Christian nations and non-Christian nations. So we'll move from America to the Christian nations and then to the non-Christian nations. In the issue of contest, all Christendom will be divided into two great classes: those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus, and those who worship the beast and the image will receive the mark. although the church and state will unite their power to compel all, both rich and poor, okay, that was interesting. We read this. Yes, that's fine. No, it's yeah, that's the one. Yes. So I was right here. Although church and state will unite their powers to compel all, small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark of the beast, yet the people of God will not receive it. The decree enforcing the worship of these days to go forth to how much? All the world, including China, including North Korea. That's quite interesting. I'm just curious to know how that will happen. I mean, the 10-foot window where the Buddhists been there, it's quite interesting. The Sabbath question is to be the issue in the great final conflict in which all the world will act a part. Okay, this is a really interesting statement in Great Controversy. She says, the dignitaries of church and state, these are, pastors and then civil people, will unite to do what? Bribe, persuade, or compel all classes to honor the Sunday. The lack of divine authority will be supplied by oppressive enactments. Political corruption is destroying the love of justice and regard for truth. And even in free America, rulers and legislators will yield to what? Popular demand for a law enforcing Sunday observance. So when I read the statements, I was like, okay, so when I'm looking for movement for Sunday law, I have to look for popular demand, religious leaders that are more susceptible to is this really happening? And this is where we now move on to, if the people are to be led to favor Sunday law, we read this. Now, there are different religious groups, and this one is a group of evangelicals that are pushing for what they call dominionist theology. It's built on Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, that God said he gave man dominion. And they're basically saying this in dominionism. It's a group of Christian political ideologies that seek to institute a nation which is governed by Christians and based on their understanding of biblical law. Rushdoony's theology focuses on theonomy, the rule of the law of God, a belief that all society should be ordered according to the laws that govern the Israelites in the Old Testament. Hang on a moment. What laws govern the Israelites in the Old Testament? The Mosaic laws, the theocracy. So they believe that theocracy has to be reestablished in America. And then his ideas on biblical law and civil government are laid out most comprehensive in the Institute of Biblical Law. Although he wrote many books dealing with the subject as well, Rushdoony's proposed system is strongly Calvinistic, emphasizing the sovereignty of God over human freedom and action. This is 5 facts about dominionism. And this dominionism has different parts to it. You have the kingdom now theology that is really prominent among evangelicals. The kingdom now theology is a branch of dominion theology which had a following within Pentecostalism. It attracted attention in the late 1980s. Kingdom now theology states that although Satan has been in control of the world since the fall, God is looking for people who will help him take back the dominion. Those who yield themselves to the authority of God's apostles and prophets will take control of the kingdom of this world, being defined as all social institutions, the kingdom of education, kingdom of science, kingdom of arts, etc., etc. So that's why they're saying God has given Christians ability to rule, so they need to take over government and rule. And part of this dominion theology also, you have the 7 mountain dominion theology. Dominionists, they believe that God has given them power to take over the dominion over the 7 mountains that are found in Revelation chapter 17. One of the mountains is government. The other one is education. The other one, media, arts, entertainment, religion, family, business. They are misinterpreting Revelation 17, and they're saying it's a call for us to take over and rule. And this is not like minor few people writing articles. This is major evangelical groups that are pushing for this. Some of the prominent Christian leaders who support this seven mountain dominion theology include the following. You have David Barton, you know him? You know James Dobson? Yes. John Hagee, Bill Johnson, Lance Wallanow, Paula White, and also notable politicians, Michelle Bachmann, Sam Brownback, Ted Cruz, Newt Gingrich, Mike Huckabee, Charlie Kirk, Sarah Palin, Rick Perry, and several others. And this was in 2021 when these names were listed. So these are very influential Christians in the evangelical world. And they are pushing for a theocracy in America. And what is so interesting about this seven mountain dominion theology, I mentioned earlier on that Donald Trump had a meeting with more than 1,000 evangelical leaders. Most of them believe that. And because they are coming from a Calvinistic mindset, Calvinistic theology basically teaches that God is the one who rules everything and he appoints people. And they believe that Donald Trump is the chosen one. He's the one that the Lord chose so that he can use him to establish a theocracy in America. That's in a nutshell. That's why Christians are behind Donald Trump, especially the evangelical Christians. So this is the push that I've just mentioned a few here in America. Let me now turn your eyes to Europe. What's happening in Europe in relation to Sunday laws? So you can search this on the internet. You have the European Sunday Alliance movement, the European Sunday Alliance movement. And what is their purpose? I don't like to describe, I just like to read to you why they are there. European Sunday Alliance is a network of more than 100 national Sunday alliances. How many national Sunday alliances? More than 100. Trade unions, employers' organizations, civil society organizations, churches, religious communities committed to do what? To raise awareness of the unique value of synchronized free time for our European societies. Sunday and more general, decent working hours are the focus of our campaigns. So what are they campaigning for? They are campaigning for Sunday. And this gets very interesting. A commitment for a work-free Sunday and a decent working hours. So that is what the European Sunday Alliance movement is pushing. Why do they want Sunday? They want Sunday to be a day of rest. And what are the reasons? They said to protect our health. Second, to respect our family. And then, let's just live together. And this European Sunday Alliance has been there. They tried to convince the European Court of Justice to enact a law that forces all the European companies to not allow employees to come and work on Sunday. And the European Court of Justice in 1998 struck down their request and basically said, you need to prove why Sunday, why not Saturday, why not Friday? Why should we force companies to rest on Sunday? And then they went out and did a research, and you can find their researches in their website. Deloitte and some of these big multinational companies sponsored lots of research that was done at universities in Europe. And their research findings were quite interesting because they were able to prove that working on Sunday is dangerous to health. They were able to prove that people who work 7 days a week, not resting, are prone to risk causing accidents. They have high blood pressure problems. They have chronic lifestyle diseases. And they proved that Sunday is actually risky to work on Sunday. And they have studies and university studies, I went through a lot of them, that were quite interesting. And then they say that our families are just kind of being torn apart because the husband is at work on Sunday, the wife is at work on Sunday, and there's no time for family, and divorce rates are high. So we need one day in which husband, wife, and the children can all be home. And that day must be Sunday. And so that was their main argument. And this was their founding statement on their website. A work-free Sunday and decent working hours are of a paramount importance for citizens throughout Europe. We, the undersigned, believe that all citizens of the European Union are entitled to benefit from decent working hours that, as a matter of principle, exclude working late evenings, nights, bank holidays, and Sundays. So they are basically saying we want European countries to, companies to basically allow employees to rest on Sunday. The Lord wants us to rest, but He has given us the Sabbath day, Saturday, not Sunday. And it's a day for us to spend with family. It's time for us to reconnect. It's not Sunday. They are noticing the problem of overwork, but their solution is not God ordained. So what is interesting, if you look at the members who are part of this organization, you have the Fédération Générale de Travail de Belgique. This is in Belgium. You have the Catholic General. You have Sunday Alliances in Slovakia, in Austria. There are several. I mean, in every European country, they now have representatives. And not only representatives, but they were successful. And their success is quite interesting. They were able to get Poland to enact Sunday closing laws to a point where of the Sunday closing, so many Sundays in a year, you know how many Sundays you are allowed to trade on in Poland at the moment? Only 7. Only 7. The rest is closed. You cannot do anything on that Sunday. So this is rather very, very interesting. And then there's another movement called the Green Sabbath movement. And they're basically saying, we want one day of rest. And they came up after COVID-19. They said, well, COVID-19 taught us that we've been overworking, our world has not been resting, so we need one day in which industries can be switched off, carbon emissions can be, industries just shut down one day, and that day must be Sunday. And this is on their website. They say, if there's nothing you can do about the environment, nothing. Maybe one of the best things you can do. One day every week, do nothing. So that's what they're promoting. One day a week of rest. And in the wake of all that, we found a very interesting encyclical that was published by the Pope. In 2015, we call it the Climate Change Encyclical, the Laudato Si, on care for our common home. And I've read a section of this. When you read it, you have this outline of this encyclical. You have what is happening to our common home. That is the main focus of chapter 1. Chapter 2, the gospel of creation. The human roots of ecological crisis is basically saying that the Lord created a perfect world, and sin that came through man is what has corrupted this earth. Is he right? Yes, he's right there. And then the integral ecology and the lines of approach and action. So in chapter 5 and chapter 6, it's basically now bringing solutions. It says, we now have climate problems because man is overworking, is not taking care of the environment, and things of that. So one of the solutions that he brings is quite interesting because he actually gives you a Bible study about the biblical Sabbath. He goes to the book of Leviticus, giving you Bible studies, so just so that you can see a snapshot of this. He says, we see this, for example, in the law of the Sabbath. On the seventh day, God rested from all his work. He commanded Israel to set aside each seventh day as a day of rest, a Sabbath. Then he quotes the verses that we use a lot, the Seventh-day Adventist. He knows it. Similarly, every 7 years, a sabbatical year was set aside. He quotes Leviticus 25. When sowing was forbidden and one reaped only what was necessary to live and to feed on one's household. Finally, after 7 weeks of years, which is to say 49 years, the Jubilee was celebrated as a year of general forgiveness and liberty throughout the land of all its inhabitants. So this law came about as an attempt to ensure balance and fairness in their relationship with others and with the land on which they lived and worked. At the same time, it was an acknowledgement that the gift of the earth by its fruits belongs to everyone. He's right. The Lord gave us the Sabbath so that we don't overwork, and listen to what he says. On Sunday, our participation in the Eucharist has special importance. Now, how did we come from the 7-day Sabbath to Sunday? Yeah, it's right. You've given the right Bible study, but where you are driving to is not correct. So it's basically saying Sunday, like the Jewish Sabbath, is meant to be a day which heals our relationship with God, with ourselves, with others, and with the world. Sunday is the day of the resurrection, the first day of the new creation, whose first fruits are the Lord's risen humanity, the pledge of the final transfiguration of all created reality. It also proclaims man's eternal rest in God. So it's basically pushing for Sunday. So after that encyclical that came in 2015, you heard the climate change, the Paris Agreement that came, and just the last part, the law of weekly rest forbade work on the 7th day, so that your ox and your donkey may have rest, and the son of your maidservant, the stranger, may be refreshed. Rest opens our eyes, the larger picture, and gives us renewed sensitivity to the rights of others. And so the day of rest, centered on the Eucharist, sheds its light on the whole week and motivates us to greater concern for nature and the poor. So it's basically pushing for Sunday. He's basically saying the crisis in our world can only be solved if we rest on Sunday. That is the Sunday thing. And then this is quite interesting. I'm going to read another one, which is, you have heard about the common good. And as I'm transitioning to this aspect of the common good, let me briefly talk about the World Economic Forum by Dr. Klaus Schwab. I had mentioned this earlier on. He wrote a book called COVID-19 and the Great Reset. And it was published in 2020. And if you read the book, this is basically his premise. His argument is that every nation meets its national challenges, is able to meet them. But what COVID-19 taught us is that nations are not able to address global issues. They were too slow to enact certain COVID-19 laws and stuff like that. So what is needed is a world government. What is needed is global government which will deal with global issues. And that's why he calls it COVID-19 and the Great Reset. And that reset is something that was pushing. This was 2020. And this year in 2023, October 4th, the Pope published another encyclical called Laudato Deum. And in this encyclical, he's calling for global authority as well, as we'll read. It is not helpful to confuse multilateralism with a world authority concentrated in one person or an elite with excessive power. When we talk about the possibility of some form of world authority regulated by law, we need not necessarily think of a personal authority. We are speaking above all of more effective world organizations equipped with the power to provide global common good, the elimination of hunger and poverty, and the sure defense of fundamental human rights. So it's basically calling that the world should actually establish a global authority that is run and given to a global organization to basically run these things. And in their own documents, the only organization that has the moral right and the moral stamina to basically take over and be the moral leader of the world is the Catholic Church. And the common good that is talking about here, as other slides that have skipped shown, is observance of Sunday. So the Pope is calling for a global world authority. The World Economic Forum is calling for the global world authority. And the Bible tells us that they will have global world authority. That's quite very, very interesting. And this appeals to the Pope did not fall on deaf ears. Politicians throughout the world reacted. and the Paris Climate Agreement, which happened in 2015. 196 countries were involved in this, and they made decisions to reduce carbon emissions, and rich countries will provide 100 billion to developing ones so that they can adapt to to the climate change crisis. Every 5 years, countries are going to review their carbon emissions, keeping it between 2 degrees and 1.5 degrees Celsius, and recognizing human influence on climate, and measuring carbon emissions. All of these, I think we know these things. Clean technologies, role of forest, climate damage, all of this is being done. But as they say, the climate change is still worsening. There's more disasters. We need to be more aggressive and take more aggressive measures. And the Pope in the encyclical is calling for companies to shut down 1 day a week, which now lines up with the previous presentation that I did, showing that Sunday closing laws are the first ones usually that easily people buy into before you actually get to worship on Sunday. So I think this is probably the last slide. It's refusing to move. Yeah, so this is the last slide on this presentation. And I've just shown you briefly the movements in America, the movements in Europe, Pope's encyclical, what is happening to try and push for Sunday. I did not get time to actually share with you how these movements were successful in getting countries to adopt Sunday laws. I mean, many countries globally are now adopting Sunday closing laws in large numbers, and they keep adding and adding more and more. Some of the countries in Europe, you cannot open Sunday stores from 9 to 12. After that, you can open. Malls are shut down. And in other countries, the whole day on Sunday, you can't do anything. And actually, in one of the rare islands, the Cook Islands in the South Pacific, I sometimes go there as well to go and preach there. On Sundays, they have to go to church on Sunday. And you can't do any kind of work on Sunday in those islands, some of those islands, such that, should I say this or not? Our church was faced with a challenge of whether our church members can still go to church on Sunday or not. So I'll just leave it at that. So there was quite an issue on that. So the Sunday movement is gaining traction. And like I said, I didn't put the slide that shows countries that have actually adopted Sunday as a day of rest. And that the movements in America towards Sunday law are significant and quite important. So that's all I had for you with regards to the second presentation, the 21st century Sunday law movement. Yeah, you may. Very good questions, those three questions. Like the pastor said, I will attend to them a bit later, but that's it. That's
As far
good.
as possible, let's hold the questions
So I don't know what's gonna, because I've finished now. So we pray and we have 15-minute break and we come back? Okay. Okay, let's pray. Father, we thank you for the light you have given us on this particular issue and the movements that have been made as we will be preparing to come up to the last presentation. May your Spirit guide us, may you lead us, may you strengthen us, and may you help us, O Lord, to be ready for what's coming. In Jesus' name I pray.